the Education Lounge podcast.
Welcome to the Education Lounge podcast. This is episode 9, and today we're joined by Rupa, who is El Presidente, because she basically
the big B.
Yeah, she's the big B. She manages Redbridge Tuition, which is us, and also the Hunnypot Day Nursery, which is managed by Vicky, who also joins us on this chat.
Which is in Huddersfield.
Yeah. Okay. So.
Hi, Vicky.
Hi.
All right. So I just want to start by asking, what's your experience in childcare and education? First of all, to Rupa.
Well, to me, okay, so 2004, I did an early years PGCE, which if you've watched previous podcasts, etc., you'll know I was unable to finish for personal circumstances. Was tutoring all the way through it. Again, it was just like a hobby. I was just doing it as a favour to a friend, and it just built from there. Prior to that, in 20 years ago, 2001, we bought a childcare business. And the reason, because this is the first question I'm always asked, you're in London, that's 200 miles away. Why so far away? And the reason was because my husband refused to buy anything that was on lease. And it was a business that he was running at the time, and it was a 29-place nursery that was running, I have to say, very badly, because the lady who we bought it from was on the verge of a nervous breakdown and had a nervous breakdown.
Okay.
And then that eventually got built up. We had a lot of issues in 2004 when the then Every Child, was it Every Child Matters then? I can't remember what it was called. It was called Every Child Matters. Basically, it got, I can't think of the word, not legalised, but, the government put in...
They brought in some regulations.
It got regulated, that's the word. It got regulated. We had major issues because the then manager didn't do what she was asked to do, and at this end there was a lot of ill health, so things fell apart a little bit. So we rebranded, we started again, we re-registered with Ofsted, and I think Vicky came along not far after that, was it? Wasn't too far.
It were about 2003, 2004 when I came.
Yes.
But I came on a college placement to start off with.
Yes. Yeah, it was September 2004.
So I did my college placement, and then did that for a year, and then I did another placement here, and then I got offered a full-time job. So then going from there, I was a nursery nurse, and then I went to a nursery room senior, and then worked up, and then went to deputy manager, and now manager.
Yes. Done really well. So then so that was in 2004, and Vicky has been with us all that time. And then in 2012, the manager then, Millie, who sort of started just before Vicky did, who's now retired, rang me up on a snowy February to say the building next door's come up for sale. So at this time it was a 29-place nursery. I went to view the building the next week. We set up plans on what we could do. I put together a business proposition, took it to a couple of banks. We got keys in July, I think it was, and then it went mad and we were in there by September. We had August, we had effectively 6 weeks to turn this building into a nursery. And obviously I'm over here, but I did go up there for that time, while the other nursery was still running.
Yeah.
And then one weekend, everything got transferred over.
How many places did the new building hold?
This one holds 62. So we've doubled in size,
Right.
more than doubled in size. And it's been a hell of a journey, really.
Okay.
Non-stop.
Let's move on to the next question. So I'm just wondering, what do you think is the purpose of nurseries? So as you see it, why would a parent send their child to a nursery?
I have a big picture answer to this. I don't know whether you, Vicky, want to wade in on this first.
I think from like getting to see the experiences that children are having, it's about them being able to interact and, you know, have social time with children, because some children don't get to see anybody else. So it's more like getting them opportunities to get messy, socialise, learn and just play.
Yeah, a lot of what we see is this is just one example, and this is by no means every single child, but the nursery is in a deprived area. We have a lot of children who would generally develop less social skills. So, for example, teaching children how to use knife and fork and cutlery. It's a very sort of simple example.
Yeah.
But, you know, so the staff will often have to role model what to do. And the big picture answer to what the purpose of nurseries, in my opinion, is, as society has changed, as both parents, because if you think about in the 50s, it was the man who went out to work and the woman did the childcare. And you know, you knew your neighbours and it was a community. And then as women have had to go out to work to make ends meet, and obviously with Second World War and all of that, and the breakdown of sort of the extended family, what happens to the children?
Yeah. So they need the childcare.
So they need the childcare, and governments, and in fact, this is now childcare has become, is developed here and in the States and in the sort of Western world. But you know that probably about 5 years ago, no more than that because we've had lockdown. Probably about 7 years ago, I was getting emails to say, you know, there are opportunities to set up childcare businesses in places like India and China. So it's beginning, the same process is taking place over there. So the idea of childcare is to have a systemized process where children get to do all the things they would have done before both parents had to go out to work.
So these nurseries, do they have is there any regulation in terms of curriculum? Or?
Yes. Yeah. So curriculum came in 2004, wasn't it, Vicky? First one was Every Child Matters. Your sound is gone. Every Child Matters. And then it was something else, I can't remember. It was the 7 steps of the 7 areas of learning were brought in after that, but I can't remember what it was. And then they brought in the EYFS, which is the early years foundation stage. So just like in school, you have key stage 1, key stage 2, etc. The early years foundation stage is the bit that key stage 1 is built. Key stage 1 is built on the early years foundation stage. So there are 7 areas of learning, aren't there? Yeah. Can't remember them off the top of my head, but basically you're looking at children being able to read and write, to be able to count and have social skills and become independent.
But then there's a lot of like when you teach a child in year one, there's a lot of them that struggle with.
Oh yeah.
They don't reach the minimum.
No, in fact, we've got, because of lockdown, we've got children who come to tuition who are in year 2 who can't read.
Yeah.
Now, in places like Sweden and the Nordic countries, that's quite common. You know, that a child is not really taught to read till they're about 7, it's just play. Till then, although I think it may be changing. But we do get a lot of children. We're seeing more and more children in tuition who are at least a year behind based on the EYFS and the Key Stage 1. I don't know what you're finding, Vicky, with EYFS.
Like at the moment, you can tell that lockdown's had a big impact on all of the ages. So usually we'd see that babies, the more easygoing, you know, they're happy to join like new areas and things like that. When they're coming in, you can see how emotional they are as well.
Yeah.
And a lot of children are not used to being around anybody at the moment. So they're very wary, they're unsettled.
Very unsettled. I've noticed that a lot.
Yeah.
When I've come up there.
You can see it in the parents as well. They're anxious because they're not used to having the children around anybody. So it has had a big impact on everyone.
Yeah.
I've noticed, my friend had a baby like a year ago, like during lockdown, and he said it was similar. So he's trying to get, his little daughter goes to the private day nursery just like 3 times a week in order to get that socialisation, because like with around people she's not very, very good. And it's because of lockdown, because she couldn't see anyone else apart from my friend and his wife. So,
it's a very common story. Okay. Very common story.
Let's just sort of move on. I think cost question is important. So in terms of, if you want to send your child to a nursery, what are the sort of typical costs that you could expect to sort of have to outlay? You got private and probably I don't know how the system works exactly, but maybe you can enlighten me.
Depending on your circumstances and what kind of sessions you're looking for, then there's different a different costing for full-time places, part-time places. We work on a pro rata calculation, so everyone knows where they stand. Then it's all calculated for the parents, and they work. You know, they know that payment will come out on, say, the 1st of every month. There is a lot of support now for parents. So there's 2-year-old funding and 3 and 4-year-old funding.
So,
sorry, were you going to say?
No, something? Go on, finish.
A lot of parents now can get extra support from the government as well. They tried to balance it out by offering more working parents, you know, like a top-up. So that's like your 30 hours that's advertised. And then you can get like different types of tax-free childcare. So this support for everybody. And we, like, from what we offer, you can see the impact that it has on them parents as well.
So typically most private nurseries, which is what we are, take children from 6 weeks onwards. When they, until they turn 2, it is the peripheral individual circumstance that determines how much help they get. So, you know, if they're a student, which we seem to see a lot of, then a lot of their costs are paid, childcare costs are paid, so that they can go and attend college. you've got tax credits, you've got all the other standard government incentives that are out there. And then when the child turns 2, the government offers every child who from 2 to 3 years old 15 hours a week of free childcare that the government pays for. Now there's a big...
That's based on like the parents fitting into certain criteria.
Yes. So it's
Means tested.
It's means tested. Then when they go to 3 years old, there's 3-year-old funding and 4-year-old funding, which typically is 30 hours. Now there was talk about introducing 30-hour free childcare for the 2 to 3-year-olds. That hasn't happened yet, but what the government has done is brought in this thing which not every nursery does, but we do. It's called stretch, where you can spread your 15 or 30 hours across. So the government pays term time only. It's based on the school system, but they've brought in this stretch system where it allows parents to bring children in during holidays if they so wish. Obviously, it depends on what the nursery can manage, because we, above all, there are 2 major things apart from the socialising and the teaching. There's 2 major things really that we are constantly aware of, and one is that we meet the Ofsted ratios. So there are guidances set by Ofsted, and you have to be Ofsted registered to get the funding.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're not Ofsted registered, you can still run as a nursery, but you can't get the free funding. But to get the say free funding, I've lost my train of thought. Yeah, so you have to be Ofsted registered to get the free funding. I've lost my train of thought. We were talking about stretch funding, weren't we?
Yeah, so it is, if the parents wish to stretch the funding, they can do. Sometimes it's really tricky to calculate, but what you do is it gives the parents that opportunity to, like Rupa says, bring them in the holidays and keep a consistent routine for the children. Which, if children are off for, say, the whole of summer, when they come back at the start of the new term, some children don't cope as well as others at coming back after like having a full 6 weeks off. So some parents use that opportunity to keep them in, so they can keep in a nice routine.
Yeah, I would have thought it would be pretty important, because a lot of parents can't have that much time off work. Like, consider, unless you're a teacher and you go by term times, then most people don't work in that way.
No, so what happens then is the parent will take the 15-hour or the 30-hour free funding, stretch it wherever they're able to, and then pay a top-up. So they pay additional fees to put their child in for extra hours. The 2 things I've remembered, the 2 things that were really are the 2 big things that we as a nursery have to absolutely adhere to. One is safeguarding, and the second is that we meet Ofsted ratios. So Ofsted set out guidelines as to how many staff per child, or how many children per staff,
per member of staff,
per members of staff, and there is a dichotomy there where it's a different rule for schools.
Okay.
and a different rule for nurseries.
What's
that's
it?
a whole-
What's it for nurseries? And so what's the?
So they've changed the rules. Vicky, do you want to take this? They've changed the rules. Let me just put my 2 cents worth in. So that it used to be really strict, and now they've said it's guidelines as long as you stay within the guidelines.
So you've got your baby room age. You've got a ratio of 1 to 3, so 1 adult to 3 children, and then it goes into your next age bracket, which is what we'd call your toddler age children. So you've got a ratio of 1 to 4, again 1 adult to 4 children, and then your preschool children. You've got your ratio of 1 to 8, so 1 adult to 8 children.
That must be very difficult to maintain. Like with if you've got one member of staff for three babies.
Yeah, it is. It is not easy.
Yeah.
It's probably one of our biggest challenges to maintain and make sure that we stay within ratios, because for any childcare business, at least 75% of the money that comes in goes to wages.
Yeah.
And for the amount that these members of staff have to do, and the majority of them are on minimum wage in almost every nursery.
Yeah.
You know, it's a big ask.
It's difficult with young children.
And dealing with children or working with children is not easy.
Okay. I want to touch on sort of the types of nurseries, that kind of thing, because I don't really know that much of the difference between, say, Montessori and something else. So you've got different types of, they work in different ways. I don't know if you could help me understand that. So,
Sure. Vicky, you want to do this, or do you want me to do it?
You can do this one, all the fancy words.
So typically there are 3 types of nurseries that are the most common. You've got your standard nursery that follows EYFS. You've got Montessori nurseries, and Montessori nurseries were set up by a lady called Maria Montessori. And the key difference between those two initially, although it's sort of blurred a lot now, was that with a Montessori, everything was planned. So just like in schools where teachers have to plan out the lessons, we have to do the same at the nursery, but we have to do it. So with the Montessori, the planning would be around the child. So if a little boy, for example, is big into Superman or Spider-Man or whatever it is, some sort of superhero, and another little boy is big into Barbie dolls.
Oh, yeah. You've got to design activities based on
yeah.
that.
Or there's somebody who just wants to colour all the time. Then all of the activities in that Montessori would be around the scaffolding that takes place around the learning is based on that child's interest. Now, EYFS initially was you set up, there are steps that they go up. So in the old curriculum, pre-2014, you had a level, by the time you were in year 6, you had to have achieved a level 5, and if you achieved a level 6, you were considered in the top quarter percentile. The original so the original EYFS was set up along those lines, where there were steps that there are next and still there are next steps of. Yeah. So is a baby able to turn, for example? Do they recognise you when you go up, and do they smile?
Yeah.
Certain things. So there are steps within development, And what EYFS has done is brought in a lot of what the Montessori system did. I've got that right, haven't I, Vicky? That you try and plan around the child's interest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the next steps.
And the next steps, obviously. Yeah. And then you've got an emerging type of nursery, which is they're called forest schools. And in a nutshell, what they are is that almost all of the learning takes place outdoors in a foresty sort of a woodland sort of environment. So
Sounds really fun.
yeah.
Although, what about babies? They can't do that.
No, they can't. They can't. But there's
Out in the wilderness.
Yeah. No. Forest schools are more for the toddlers and upwards, really. But that's the sort of emerging.
What do you think of that model?
For us, we looked at this. Do you remember?
Yeah.
We looked at how we could incorporate some of the forest school ideas. For us, where we are, we're in a deprived area with no forest around us. Not possible.
Yeah.
Just
no, that will be a problem.
Logistically, we even looked at, well, what if we did it one day a week and we took the children out one day a week?
Yeah.
Logistically, just not possible.
Yeah, there's like
So-
costs as well, like getting them
Exactly.
to the forest and
Yeah.
getting them back
Yeah.
and then safety.
Well, we take children out.
Yeah.
And you have to do all your risk assessments. So, you know, when a room leader comes in to Vicky and says, oh, we're taking them to the park or the museum, then Vicky needs to see the risk assessments before she'll approve it. So there's always risk assessments.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's so we try and incorporate, I must admit we haven't succeeded yet, but we try and incorporate as much of that forest ethos into, because we're really lucky, we've got a big garden.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're trying to do is develop the nursery so that we can incorporate some of that forest idea into the garden, but we haven't got there yet.
Okay, I just want to ask the question to both of you. What's the most, so from your perspective, so what's the most challenging aspects of, in your case, overseeing everything?
The distance is definitely a challenge. I'd love to be able to just pop in, although probably Vicky's thinking, good job she's far away, because there's chaos every time she comes. So,
You bring the chaos with you.
yeah, it follows me. So the distance, I've had the nursery now 20 years. When we first got it, obviously I was 20 years younger, and to do a day trip was, I wouldn't even think twice about it. Drive up, do what I needed to do, be there for 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock sometimes, you know, drive back at 5 o'clock, and be into work the next day, into tuition the next day. Can't do it anymore.
Yeah.
So that
Quite far, Huddersfield. That's about as far as.
But I used to be able to do it. It was never an issue. I must admit, at the minute I am struggling, but I think a lot of this is lockdown fever, where we've just got out of the habit. I've just got out of the habit.
Yeah.
So that's definitely a big challenge. After lockdown, bringing the business back up has been a massive challenge financially. The transition was fine because Vicky knows her stuff inside out, and you know, I've got no issues in just letting her run with it.
Yeah.
And then really it's just the planning of the business going forward, because for the last 10 years or so, probably not 10 actually, probably about 7 years or so, I've constantly been looking to say, okay, I want to get another nursery up there. It's just, we've looked at so many and it just hasn't happened. So now I'm at a point of, okay, well, let's just develop this one a bit more.
Okay.
So that's my biggest challenge. I don't know what Well,
Yeah.
yours will be a bit more day to day, I
Yeah,
imagine.
day-to-day challenges.
Yeah. So like, no day is ever the same in the nursery. There's always something going on. You've got obviously COVID has had a big impact on everyone. We're wanting to obviously, like Rupa says, develop the nursery, and then we want to pick the business up and get spaces filled. Which now we're seeing more people are getting out and about, so we're getting a lot more inquiries. But a lot of people are wanting, like set kind of requests, so they only want to do certain hours, and then you try your best obviously to cater for what everybody wants, but then you start on a smooth roll and then something else happens.
Changes by the hour.
Yeah, you've either got, like, obviously with the whole COVID situation, you've either got people that are needing to isolate. So if anyone was a close contact, obviously you had to isolate everybody. We're at that time of year now where everyone's getting the winter colds or they're not feeling well because everybody's mixing again. So obviously they're gonna start feeling unwell.
Yeah, because we're going into flu season.
Yeah. So you've constantly got to keep your staffing going, and then you've got to manage your staffing to manage your ratios. Then you've got the day-to-day running of the nursery. So you've got like everything that happens throughout the day. You've got your office side, you've got the nursery nurse side.
You've got the building side. Oh, we've had a leak here, or Asda hasn't turned up, or
car parks flooded.
Car parks flood. It's all sorts of stuff.
Okay.
But you can't really write it because, like I say, no day is the same.
Yeah, staffing is probably one of the biggest headaches in terms of, like you said, if somebody comes, is not well or needs to isolate, or
I think that's a challenge for
everyone.
Well, it's a challenge for most businesses, but especially education.
Well, particularly because we've got to stay within ratio. So if a member of staff in the baby room has to isolate,
then
we have to see they've been in contact with everybody else. So we have to then see, who have they been in contact with? Which parents do we need to speak to? Which members of staff need to isolate? But in the meantime, we still have to keep the room going. So then how do we do that? It's a massive challenge.
Okay. I'd like to draw to a close, I suppose. Thank you, Vicky, for joining us, and Rupa. And we'll hopefully see you next time for another podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.